Hi, I'm Angela Hui. I'm a journalist, editor, and the author of Takeaway Stories from a Childhood Behind the Counter. I'm originally from South Wales Valleys and I live in London now. My work has been published in the BBC, The Guardian, Financial Times, The Independent, and among others. I was the former food and drink editor at Time Out London and the lifestyle reporter at HuffPost. My debut book, Takeaway, is a food memoir based on my youth growing up in a Chinese takeaway in South Wales, and it's a love letter to immigrant-owned hospitality businesses. In the book, I explore the idea of being food that's intrinsic to our lives but conditioned by society and circumstances. I document my own family's takeaway in South Wales over its 30-year life, from opening in 1988 to its eventual closure in 2018. The intervening years are filled with stories of hustling in the kitchen to, meeting the evening dinner rush or family meals together before service, or venturing to Cardiff to stock up on ingredients at the wholesalers, and research trips back to Hong Kong to see extended family. Along with the kind of alienation of being one of the few Chinese families in my village and dealing with a lot of constant stream of racist harassment and vandalism from locals or, customers. I think for many immigrant children, life's teaching manifests in the jobs that we did. Working in the takeaway with me and my brothers and my family taught me the value of tenacity and hard work, being responsible for food prep, washing utensils after the end of service, and just kind of keeping things orderly. I remember we used to peel hundreds of whole prawns until our fingers were stinging. We used to quarter button mushrooms and beat giant vats full of eggs. And, the scent of kitchen work has become such an internalized memory. The, distinctive smell of deep fat fryer oil, the kind of work grease, and the sweet and sour sauce that's kind of clinging to our clothes no matter how much we washed them. And they still continue to linger on my mind even after the takeaway is long closed now. These are the kind of jobs that we did, the jobs that we necessarily didn't love doing, but they were jobs that we had to do to survive. And so like my parents' generation, they worked so hard in order to cook so we didn't have to as the next generation. So they gave me the freedom to pursue and explore what I actually wanted to do in life, which was journalism and writing. So I'm really, really grateful for everything that they've sacrificed in order to put food on the table, to working 16, 17 hours a day on their feet. So in order for me and my brothers to go to higher education and study. I think one of the reasons why I really wanted to write this book about Chinese takeaways and to tell my story is that in the past several years, the Chinese takeaway that was, once a staple in British towns and villages has slowly been on the decline. It's been threatened by, rising food prices, competition from other takeaways and restaurants, but also a lot of competition from food ordering apps. And you kind of lose that human element of actually physically going to a shop for your weekly Friday night dinner. And I think as well, so many Chinese takeaways have closed due to generational reasons as well. A lot of my parents' generation are slowly retiring or they're either dying out. And I think there's the reason why this long chapter of working class immigrant history is slowly being eroded. And I think that when Chinese takeaways close, we kind of lose a part of history. So all these Chinese takeaways and restaurants that are positioned in these rural outposts in seaside towns or high up in the mountains or, even in the most remotest places, there's always a Chinese takeaway. And I think there's something beautiful in that, and there's some comfort in that for me. And I feel like they all serve a purpose, they all serve their communities. So many people rely on them for their daily or weekly chat, for food. And especially like during COVID, where a lot of elderly, they weren't able to go out and about, and they were still able to go to the Chinese takeaway for, their one piece of exercise to go to the, community outposts, essentially. And I think without them, without Chinese takeaways, the villages, the high streets and the towns, I feel like there'll be a little less delicious and colourful. You know, I wrote this book in 2020 at the height of COVID lockdown, and this was at a time when East and Southeast Asian community in the UK and across the world had been uniquely scrutinised. This kind of misplaced fear and ignorance had prompted a rise in racism and attacks where hardworking family-run takeaways and restaurants like myself and my family, you know, they had been hit hard, they had been targeted, they had been vandalised, and Chinatowns had turned into ghost towns where people actively avoided them in case of getting COVID. And the media kept using pictures of East and Southeast Asians in any COVID-related news, even though it had nothing to do with them. And this kind of contributed to the othering, the dangerous kind of, you know, finger pointing. And for a lot of people, you know, East and Southeast Asians were kind of seen as the embodiment of disease and the stigma that kept people away. And overnight, East and Southeast Asians went from being the invisible model minority, you know, the good, quiet immigrant that works hard, that sticks their heads down. But they became overexposed overnight for all the wrong reasons, you know, putting them as the face of COVID, essentially. I think that's why it's so much more important than ever to have all these East and Southeast Asian stories like my own, and to kind of shine a light on these small independent businesses, you know, during a time when they're really struggling to survive. And in my book Takeaway, I really wanted to offer a snapshot of what that scrutiny feels like. How we might be able to resist it, how we can support, and how we can rally together. I think when we had the Chinese takeaway, there was a lot of racism, there was a lot of violence, but there was also community, there was also kindness and solidarity too. You know, there was drunken racist customers and violent attacks. People were burning our wheelie bins, or they broke our windows or broke our shutters. But there was also, you know, the regular customers who we got to know that became family. We knew them through their favourite foods. We know their life stories, and they watched me and my brothers grow up behind the counter, or the hard work in front of the house staff that we had that became family members, or the delivery drivers that helped me and my brothers learn maths when we were kind of studying homework while we were still working in the counter. There was this kind of little ecosystem within that little village, and I think that is so beautiful, and that's not often talked about within these kind of immigrant businesses. I think if you're a teacher and you're interested in using this book for your lesson planning, firstly, thank you so much. I never thought in my lifetime that my book would be taught in classrooms, and I'm really honoured. I feel like there are many aspects and avenues in which ways this book can be taught in different subjects, such as like English literature, geography and home economics, because every chapter in the book has a recipe, so you can teach some lovely recipes to any cooking classes, which I've done previously. I did some spring rolls. I talked about the importance of spring rolls and also the vegetables. Managed to feed kids some vegetables, and they actually liked it, which is a win in my eyes. For English lessons, I feel that you can focus on the writing style, the language, the tone, the definitions and words, the dialogue, the scene setting, and the form and the sentence structure. One of the biggest writing tips that I got from my book editor and my agent was talking about the weather. I know it's the most British thing, but when you kind of highlight all the parts where I talk about the weather and how I scene set in certain areas, how I really try to bring the story to life via the surroundings, you know, what I was smelling, what the weather was like, what the time of day was like through the skies or through the time of day, or what the change in seasons. And I think that really adds a different dimension or colour within the writing. I feel that we can, you know, within book extracts for certain chapters that you can teach your students, you know, you can analyse how meanings are shaped in the book using the extracts that kind of explore bigger topics within the book, such as, say, exoticism, fetishization, alienation, animosity, immigration, racism, and also food. I feel like we can also analyse the ways that writers can adopt structure, form and language in the book extract. And we can also teach students on the differences of understanding the ways in which a book extract can relate to one another. Perhaps, you know, we can compare works by a different author or different food memoirs, and how the writing style compares, even when we talk about similar topics such as food or love, family, ties, or relationships, and how those kind of writing styles can kind of differ in the ways. I think students can also, potentially write essays or their responses to following questions that can be related to the book, such as what do we expect from the book takeaway that presents the theme of food, family, and love? What are the kind of tropes that we might expect in the book? Or what are some of the impacts of the negative stereotypes of East and Southeast Asians that people have that are unique in the book? And can we describe some of them, and what does this mean, and how they might feel? I guess what are also the idiosyncrasies of first generation Chinese children, specifically, those who worked in parents' takeaways and relationships? What are the family kind of issues? What are the family things that bring us together? What does that say working and living together in the same space for immigrant families? And I feel like a lot of these topics and questions, you can kind of open this up for class discussion. But yeah, those are some of the things I had in mind. But if you want to talk more, please do reach out. I would love to chat to you and, potentially lesson plan together in some ways. And I could definitely write out a few questions or anything else. But I'm deeply grateful and deeply honoured that you definitely want to use my book. But those are some of the things that I, was going through my mind when I was writing this book. And a lot of thoughts and feelings and a lot of love went into this book. So thank you, and thank you for listening, and yeah, I hope to hear from you soon. Thanks, bye.